Alright folks, welcome back to the Newsdesk. Today we're taking a spoilerific look at Flashpoint 5 and Justice League number 1. Now those of you who watched the Newsdesk yesterday, you know that I took a spoiler-free look. I was trying not to give too much about Justice League away. But I hadn't read Flashpoint 5 yet, so I didn't know exactly how we got to where we got to with Justice League number 1. Well, now we know. And since the books are launching tonight at midnight, or I guess last night at midnight if you're watching this at some point later tomorrow, or last Tuesday at midnight if you're watching this way in the future, whatever the deal is. Since the books are launching, I figured it was safe to go ahead and give some spoilers. Let's talk some real reviews about these books, and let's start a dialogue to see what we think. Now, first of all, I have to say that I enjoyed the story. I'm one of those guys who likes alternate Earths, alternate timelines, pocket universes, parallel dimensions, Spock with a goatee, so I was fine with everything that was happening with Flashpoint for the most part. It just gets a little confusing sometimes, the way Jeff Johns likes to layer things and, kind of give you bits and pieces of information of a story and then kind of ignore it for a while and then go back to it. And sometimes you can get lost and confused. But overall, I found Flashpoint to be very enjoyable. And one of the things that was most interesting about issue number 5 was the fact that we find out Flash is indeed the one responsible. When he went back in time to save his mother's life after she's murdered by the Reverse Flash, the evil Flash from the future, Flash accidentally alters the time stream and sends what the Reverse Flash calls a speed bullet through time, which disrupts the flow of time, causes time to fracture, and makes the new Flashpoint universe. So Flash ends up going back into the time stream, goes back and actually has a pretty heartfelt conversation with his mother, basically telling her that he's responsible for everything that happened, and that saving her life caused the universe to turn into this really dark, evil, twisted place that we see in the world of Flashpoint. So basically she says, you know what, if it saves millions of people, I have to go. It's my time. You've got to let go of me. So Flash decides he's going to go back and stop himself from going back the first time and saving her life. So we get one of these things where he's going back in time to stop himself from going back in time, from changing time, which then changes time so that the time stream becomes different. You follow? Yeah, so it's one of those things where people who didn't like Back to the Future Part 2 or Austin Powers' Spy Who Shagged Me, you're going to be just as confused and lost of reading this book as well. But for people who dig that, then this is the book for you. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that when Flash stops himself and somehow tries to get the universe to reset, it doesn't reset correctly. And the result that we end up is with the new DC universe. So that's how that machination comes along, and that's how we end up with this new universe of characters. Flash just doesn't quite get it right. However, Flash isn't aware that things are different. In fact, the only memories he has of any alternate timeline is the Flashpoint timeline that he just left behind. So he remembers his mother being alive. He remembers, her being at his birthdays and having lunch at her house a week ago, and yet now she's dead, and she's been dead for years. And, he just realizes that these memories are a gift for whatever reason. He's just able to remember this extra time he had with her, but he doesn't remember the original timeline, which is the timeline that we are all lamenting the loss of. Now, the new timeline we see taking shape in the pages of Justice League number 1. But before we get to that, I must say there is one scene at the end of Flashpoint 5. Now, I thought the scene with his mother was somewhat touching, her saying, you gotta let me go and whatever. But there's another scene at the end with Batman. In the Flashpoint universe, we find out that Bruce was actually the one who was murdered in Crime Alley, and his father Thomas became Batman. And later we also find out that his mother Martha became the Joker. Regardless, Thomas writes a letter to his son, Bruce, and gives it to the Flash to take to Bruce in the corrected timeline, which, of course, Flash does. And there's this scene where Bruce gets this letter from his dad, knowing that, moments ago, yesterday, whatever, his father was alive in this alternate universe, and he was dead, and his father wrote him this letter to encourage him and to tell him to keep fighting the fight and keep doing what he's doing. So that, I think, is going to play a lot on Bruce in his books. I think we're going to see that a lot with Batman. When you get a letter from your dead father who is alive in the alternate timeline, who says he's proud of you and wants you to keep on doing the fight, and he was doing the same thing that you were doing here, but he was avenging you and now you're avenging him, then it kind of adds a little extra something to the character. And I kind of hope that they keep that, something happens with that letter, he frames it, it becomes a key part of the new Batcave, whatever, because I think that's an important part of the character that they really need to stick with. Now, let's move on to Justice League number 1. As I said the other day, I did a spoiler-free review of Justice League number 1, but now let's get into a little more detail. I'm not going to cover everything I said the other day, so if you want to know more about Justice League 1, go watch that other one and then come back. We'll pause. Just pause here. We'll wait for you. Okay, now that you're back and you've watched the other video, a couple big things about Justice League number 1 is, one, of course, it's set 5 years in the past. So 5 years ago from the current new DC Universe timeline is when the Justice League is first coming together. Now, I'm not exactly sure if it's going to stay in the past or if at some point it's going to leapfrog into the current time, but we know that there's stuff going on with Superman in Action Comics, where Action Comics is going to be set 5 years in the past as well, before all of this stuff happens. So it's kind of interesting how they're playing with two different points of time in the current new timeline with these different books. And I know it sounds confusing, but it's really not, because right now, this is the only book that's out yet. It may be confusing in the future if guys start contradicting themselves, writing different stories, but right now that's not really a problem. The key thing here, though, is that you see characters. I said in the other video that you see Cyborg a little bit, you see Superman a little bit, but it's really a Batman and Green Lantern story. Cyborg, when you see him in this story, he's not Cyborg yet. He's still Victor. He's still a guy who's a great football player. He's a guy who he has a strained relationship with his father. He's just a normal dude. So we can assume that something is going to happen in this storyline which causes him to have to become Cyborg. And I'm guessing that one of these new superheroes, Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Flash, whoever, is going to be responsible for what happens, and therefore they are going to take Cyborg under their wing and, bring him along. That's just a guess, but I would say there's probably something like that going on. Superman, on the other hand, is one of those characters here in this storyline where people have kind of heard these hints. There may be something going on. There may be this guy who's got these weird powers or whatever, but nobody's really seen him. No one's really interacted with him. Batman is the only one who seems to think that he's some sort of threat. He's got a lot of power that's off the charts. And so it really turns into this idea where they meet Superman in the last, 2 pages of the story. He's just barely there, and he makes this dramatic entrance showing off how much power he has. Green Lantern, who is really cocky, basically thinks because of his power ring he can handle anything, he can stop anything, he can do whatever he wants, and Superman kind of shatters that. So I don't know if there's going to be some sort of resentment on the part of Green Lantern for Superman, but they certainly have laid the groundwork where that could happen if you want to have some sort of conflict between the two. It's not really touched upon in here, but it's just this idea that here's Green Lantern, he thinks he can do anything, and Superman comes along and blows that idea right out of the water. That's really all the big beats between those two books. Now, the question is, and this was asked by a member of the forums at ineedcomics.com, part of Pop Culture Network, ask is this worth it? I think it was Deadman 2099, and I apologize if that's not who it was, but I think that's who it was. He asked, is it worth it? Does this seem like a good story? Does it seem like something you want to read? And I have to say, yes. Yes, indeed it does. First of all, Flashpoint was very touching. Especially all the stuff with Bruce and Thomas. I thought that Thomas Wayne came across as one of the strongest characters in that entire storyline, and the whole scene with Bruce reading the letter from his dad, I don't. Maybe it's the fact that I am a father, I don't know, but it seemed like a very touching, very wonderful moment, and a nice bow on the end of the Flashpoint series. Now, as far as Justice League goes, I have to say I did enjoy it. I am looking forward to seeing more from these characters. Am I sad that the old universe has gone away? Yes. But on the other hand, I really liked seeing this version of the Justice League. I liked this version of the universe. Again, one example that I use is Green Lantern First Flight, the animated movie that came out last year. It was 100% true to Green Lantern, and it was all new and different. It was modernized. It was not, the character from the 60s. This is, it's set in modern day and whatever, but it still felt like it was true to Green Lantern, who he was, what his powers are, what his friends and family, etc., etc. That's how I feel about this Justice League. It feels very true to Batman, to Green Lantern, and yet it feels new, it feels different, it feels refreshing, and it feels exciting. So as much as I kind of hate to admit it, because I was really kind of mad about all these changes that they were making at DC, I have to give them a thumbs up. Both of these stories worked really well for me. Flashpoint and Justice League, the only thing that really disappoints me is that these are the only books out this week. There's 52 number ones, and I have a feeling that I'm going to be reading a lot more of them than I originally thought. If you got any questions or comments, feel free to stop by our boards at popculturenetwork.com or ineedcomics.com. You can also leave us a voicemail message by calling 1-217-953-4025, or you can send me an email, dirt@popculturenetwork.com or dirt@ineedcomics.com. Either way, you can get a hold of me. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll talk to you next time.
Dirt, call me!